Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
There's a lot happening around us. There is a lot of news, particularly with the pandemic situation. But today we are taking a break from this and shifting our gaze away. In fact, shifting our gaze very far away from India. We are looking at Cuba because some very interesting changes have taken place in Cuba. Also because the premise and promise of Cut the Clutter is to address what is complicated, what is complex, what is cluttered, and also enable us all to keep an eye on what is important in the entire world, not just India, not just with one story in India or elsewhere. So Cuba, for the first time in its history, that is beginning this Monday, yesterday as I record this, beginning this Monday, Cuba does not have a Castro in command. Now there is a little bit of a twist to that which I will tell you, but since 1960, almost 60 plus years, Cuba has been led by the two Castro brothers. So the more famous Fidel Castro, everybody remembers his beard. Many of us might have worn his t-shirts in our youth. I didn't, just because I was in small towns where these things were not available. But I do know. And his brother Raul. So Fidel Castro had sort of given up power in 2008 or so. His brother had seamlessly taken over. So for 60 years, the two brothers Castro had ruled Cuba with an iron hand. Before that, as we know, that they had both led that famous guerrilla war against the American-supported dictator Batista. So 1959, the big war took place, big revolutionary war took place, which then fired many revolutionary minds and thoughts through the generations across the country. In fact, you want to know more about that, I will take you across the outer ring road from my home, walk you into IIT, then walk across IIT and take you to JNU. You can figure out everything you want to know about Cuba and the Cuban Revolution. It is just maybe a half-hour walk away. Now, Fidel Castro passed away in 2016 at the age of 90 because of a mystery illness. Cuba is still one of the very few communist-run countries in the world where the communist-run country also has a lot more of the communist characteristics than, say, even China in terms of private enterprise and all. So it is less worse than North Korea in terms of Communist Party controls over everything from economy to people's lives, but it is also worse than China in terms of its economy, society and many things. Now, so as Fidel Castro laid down power formally, he handed over to his brother Raul Castro. Now, Raul and his wife Vilma Espin, they were also underground guerrilla fighters and quite legendary ones also, because he led that it is Raul Castro who led the famous fighting in what is called as Sierra Maestra. These are the mountains where it looks like the Batista regime was delivered the killer blow or the death blow finally. So he also was one of the great heroes of the revolution. Now, for the first time, no Castro is in charge. He is handed over power to another leader, a leader who he had appointed president, Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez. Now, Miguel Diaz-Canel was appointed president in 2016 when he actually opened up the economy a little bit, little by little. Raul Castro had opened it up a bit when he handed over to Miguel Diaz-Canel. About 127 businesses were allowed to be run by private entrepreneurs. Now, under this leader, this president, that list has gone to about 2,000. Still, as I told you, most of the businesses, most of the economy continues to be controlled by the Communist Party, by the state, by the party, through the state in Cuba. Miguel Diaz-Canel has now also taken over as the chief of the party. The chief of the party in Cuba is called, chief of the Communist Party in Cuba is called First Secretary of the Communist Party. So Raul Castro said, I am retiring, but he said, I am not going away anywhere. I will still continue to be a revolutionary fighter. And usually he is not given to delivering long speeches unlike his brother Fidel Castro, who delivered long, long speeches. But this time he spoke for 2 hours and he laid out a lot of his policies, which again is a bit like, I know that the revolution is over, but I will not accept it. And as long as I am around, I will also make sure that no one else denounces it at least. So this is change with continuity. How much change it is, how much continuity, we'll know in the course of time. I would suspect at this point this will be less change, more continuity, but there will be change. Now Miguel Diaz-Canel has taken over. He was born in 1960. So by the standards of these communist-run states, he is very young. He is very young in the sense that, as was the case with China earlier, China had their long marchers, Cuba had its guerrilla revolutionaries. So those revolutionaries are the Cuban equivalent of the long marchers. The country still has a lot of them around, a lot of the former generals are milling around. In fact, even when Miguel Diaz-Canel took over, and before that Raul Castro took over, they found that the entire power structure also was dominated by these former generals in their 80s and 90s who did not like any change, who still clung to the idea and idealism of the revolution. So I use a line from a New York Times article, which I am also sharing with you. Please read that, which says the Cubans now have to make a choice between clinging on to the ideals of the revolution or to accept defeat of the revolution. You can see that Raul Castro does not want to do that. Let us see what happens going ahead as Miguel Diaz-Canel takes over. Now, how has a younger person been able to rise to this position in Cuba? In fact, he announced it that it's the first time in Cuba's history, post-revolution Cuba's history, that a non-Castro is the real boss of Cuba, holding both the positions, right? Because earlier it was Fidel Castro and brother either holding both positions or one position after Fidel Castro left. The reason is that Raul Castro, as part of his reforms, also laid down, one, that unlike his brother who served for 49 years and actually was committed to serving for life until he got very sick and could not anymore, so handed over the baton to his brother, or maybe left his khadauns there in the tradition of the Ramayana and said, you rule in my name. Because he still continued to exercise influence Fidel Castro. He would write long articles in party publications, a bit like Kim Il-sung used to write in North Korea a long time back. In fact, that used to give some Indian publications their only source of revenue, or almost their only source of revenue, say Patriot, for example, the newspaper in Delhi. Nevertheless, let's not digress. So now, Raul Castro said that from now on, anybody elected president can only serve 2 5-year terms, no more. He also laid down that when a person gets elected to the post of the president, that person has to be below 60 years old. That's how Miguel Diaz-Canel got elected. And it looks like he's set for his second term right now. So, in his long, colorful speech, I will just pick out one odd quote and read out to you from Raul Castro. He said, as long as imperialism exists, the party, the state and the people will pay maximum attention to defense services. History teaches us too eloquently that those who forget this principle do not survive their errors. Now, this is an important point. So, he is basically trying to make a pitch that let this party run state heavily dependent on the military and the party military nexus continue, and this will be part of the ideology. Now, the fact is that the history of the world tells us, particularly post 1989, when the Cold War ended and the Soviet bloc broke up, the history tells us that armies are not really able to protect the ideologies of the nations. And I will take a little digression and tell you a story, a true story, true reported story. In 1991, you would remember that Benazir Bhutto was in power. She was in power and there was a lot of excitement in Pakistan. Zia had died a couple of years back, and the idea was that now she will strengthen democracy. After a long time, Pakistan had had elections, and Bhutto's daughter had got elected. So in that euphoria, she delivered a speech at the Pakistani National Defence College. There she said that the idea, the notion that armies could protect the ideological frontiers of the nation is outdated, because she said if armies could protect the ideological frontiers of the nations, then Soviet bloc would not have broken up. So this was also the heady feeling of the Soviet bloc breaking up. What she didn't realize was that her army was not willing to accept it. For her army, it posed an existentialist danger, because they like to control the country by claiming that they protect not just the ideological frontiers of, not just the territorial frontiers of Pakistan, but also the ideological frontiers. So many friends of mine, I was in Pakistan at that time, on a story as usual, and many friends of mine told me that she has now written her sack order, because if you go to the cream of Pakistani army and say, exact line that she used, I think, was that the notion that armies can protect ideological frontiers of the states is outdated, as the breakup of the Soviet Union has told us. Armies can only protect territorial frontiers of the state, because if that is the situation, if the Pakistani army accepts it, then it loses its special position in Pakistani power structure, society, economy, etc., etc., etc. Now he is trying, I gave you this long example to remind you that Raul Castro, even at the age of 89, when he says retiring, he is still trying to protect that structure. Now just look at what's happening to Cuba. Cuba is like, for America, like having Iran next door to it. It's another country that America detests for a long time, or the regime where the Americans detest the regime. They've been really going there. It's been, as tourists, it's a popular tourist destination. A lot of American popular culture comes from Cuba. So if you go to Miami, for example, it is really a Cuban town with full American capitalist characteristics, if I may steal a line from the Chinese discourse. So Americans, it's next door to America. Americans have felt threatened from Cuba, because Cuba was an ally for the longest time of the Soviet Union until the Soviet Union broke up. In fact, Cuban currency was also linked to the Soviet Union. Now there is an interesting story thereby, which also I will come to, about currencies. Now that is where Americans thought Russians could bring their stuff close to America's coastline, close to America's borders. So America's sense of security of being one distant, humongous continent where nobody could reach was threatened by Cuba. And you remember, Cuba has the history of the Bay of Pigs, of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which happened around the same time as the Chinese chose to launch the 1962 war on India. So Cuba is also a country that the Americans and the CIA has tried to subvert many times, or the regime they've tried to subvert many times. There have been many attempts on Fidel Castro's life by CIA, some on Raul Castro also. Yet Raul Castro did realize in the course of time that his country's economy was stalling. In 1991, as the Soviet Union died, Soviet Union, not the country, the countries, it broke up and became several countries, but Soviet Union as a union, that died. He lost his economic anchor, his military anchor, and his currency anchor. So he had to look at America, he had to link his currency to America. That led to a big black market in Cuba. In Cuba, until that time, the government owned everything, and everybody was a government employee, from a general to a professor to your grocer to your postman to your anybody who came to clean your house. Everybody was a government employee. Salaries were low, but salaries were also almost uniform. It was that kind of a communist country. So those of us who visited, say, China or Soviet Union in the past know that you go and meet a top class professor at the Academy of Oriental Studies, and it will be a pokey little matchbox sized apartment where the professor and Mrs. Professor would barely fit, and people would make do with that. And the next door neighbor could be a postman, next door neighbor could be an ambulance driver. So Cuba was also that kind of society. So he started opening up. Raul Castro started opening up, and as then we said, once he handed over to Miguel Diaz-Canel, he opened up even more. As that happened, Obama warmed up to Cuba. As Obama warmed up to Cuba, he lifted many sanctions. He actually encouraged American tourists to go to Cuba, and that became a big income for Cuba because Cubans have music, Cubans have the rum, Cubans have the cigars, Cubans have the culture, a lifestyle, a very rich culture and history of service industry, great beaches. It's next door to America. So tourism became Cuba's big earning. Then came Donald Trump, and he attacked Cuba on all fronts, just as he did with Iran. So sanctions were brought in, very tough sanctions. He even put restrictions on American tourists going to Cuba. The idea was to wreck the Cuban economy to the extent that Cubans will have no choice but to reject this communist regime. But remember, Donald Trump is of a category of strongmen leaders all over the world, including Narendra Modi, for whom the first thing is votes. The first calculation is votes. It's a line I've used before, but I will tell you again that in Hindi we say, "Bhuke ke pucho, do aur do kya hota hai?" Ask a starving man, what is 2 plus 2? He will say 4 rotis. Bhuke ko pucho, do aur do kya hota hai? Bolta hai 4 rotiyan. So for these leaders, you ask them what is 2 plus 2? They will say 4 votes. So for Trump, it was crucial to keep winning Florida, the state. Florida has a sizable contribution to the Electoral College. Florida also is inhabited by a large population of the Cuban diaspora, people who left Cuba because they were fed up of communism. They hate communism, they love their country, they hate the Castros. So they stayed there, and Trump followed all these policies also to make them happy. So when these polls were coming out on the eve of the US elections that Trump was going to lose Florida, exit polls were coming out, then several people said he cannot lose Florida because all these Cuban expatriates who live in Florida, they are going to vote for him as a bloc because they haven't forgiven Obama for having opened out to Cuba and to the communist regime, and they want the government to be tough. So Biden then had said that he will relax his policy towards Cuba, but having seen that the Cuban immigrants in Florida still voted for Trump, he has now restrained himself, and now it's evident that for Biden administration, Cuba is not a priority. So Cuba's new leaders now have their work cut out. At the same time, for them to think that they can change anything drastically is going to be tough. And just in case you start getting too excited by the thought one side or the other, because there are a lot of people of the left in India who will see it a big letdown if Cuba ceases to be a communist state altogether. For them, it is one of the last frontiers surviving because they can't see China as that last frontier, because China has become in so many ways a capitalist state. It is a capitalist state owned by a party. Cuba is not that. So they still see Cuba, they have romantic notions about Cuba. They think still that Cuba has the best health system. Doesn't matter, the top leaders of CPM, when they fall really sick, go to American hospitals, not to Cuba. Nevertheless, there is this romance about Cuba. So they should not worry too much also, because this Monday, that is yesterday, Raul Castro also got the new Politburo elected, 17 members. He inducted many young people in this lot, which signals change. But he also had someone interesting elected, that is, and pardon me if I don't get my Spanish pronunciation right, General Luis Alberto Rodriguez Lopez Calia. Now the General Saab is Raul Castro's son-in-law. So there is not a Castro there, but there is somebody from Castro's family there. So he is in the Politburo, and right now he is like the chairman of a sprawling military company which owns 5-star hotels, marinas. Marina is where yachts, etc. are parked, infrastructure projects, a bit like the army-run industry in Pakistan. So he heads all that empire, and he is now in the Politburo. What will Raul Castro do? We don't know, but he will probably retire, at least notionally, in a small city in Cuba called Santiago de Cuba. So don't confuse it with Santiago as in Chile. So he will retire there, And unlike Fidel Castro, whose burial plans were a secret everywhere, he has chosen his place for burial. His place for burial is next to where his wife Vilma Espin was buried, his revolutionary wife Vilma Espin, and he, not to take any chances, has already built a tomb for himself there. Now, what is the state of Cuban economy and Cuban society right now? Cuba is going through a deep economic crisis made worse by the American sanctions and tourism, and further now with COVID, tourism from elsewhere has also stopped. So, one source of income has completely died out. In fact, there are hours-long line for bread in Cuba. Also, Cuba's famous health system, which was run very well, fully socialist, fully free, that is now creaking, because how do you manage all this if your economy does not have any juice in this? And that's why one major reform that Cuba has tried making now is about currency. I told you I'll come back to currency. Now, the reason currency is so important when we talk about communist states is that the most significant thing the communist states do is to build an insular economics of their own and link the economics with the party, with the military. That's how this works. So, the citizen has nowhere to go. The problem with making such a controlled system is that it becomes very difficult to level with international economies. Now, this has been challenged by growing globalization all over the world. So, my recollections traveling as a journalist to communist countries, former communist countries also, say Afghanistan, which was part communist. The ruling party, PDPA at that point, Najibullah's, was communist. So, they inherited the system from the Soviets, but it had a lot of free market, which was perfectly illegal and perfectly efficient. And that was true of a lot of these countries with controlled economies, including Iran in the past. So, some of those countries just had one notional, one official price for their currency, but a street price, a black market price, which was not like in India. In India, if the dollar in the bank was 20 rupees at that time, maybe in the black market it was 25, 26, 23, sometimes 30. Not in these countries. In these countries, if the Irani currency was say $1 to one Irani currency, Rial, in the bank, it could be 20, 30, 50, 60, 100. In Afghanistan, for example, $1 in open market, which was called money market and was mostly run by Afghan Sikhs, you could get 800 Afghanis, that is the currency. That's why it's very wrong when you say Afghanis for Afghan people, they are Afghans. Afghani is the currency. So 800, 900 for a dollar, and sometimes unsuspecting people like us early on could get caught because it was very difficult to get large currency notes. So if you went in and said, I want to cash $1,000 and if I go to bank, I will get nothing, right? Obviously, so everybody cashed at the money market. So you went to cash your traveler's checks or your currency and suddenly got this much currency to carry because $1 was 800 or 900 Afghanis. So at one point we had no choice but to shove it all, stuff it all in a bag this size. And then you lived in a very makeshift living place and you were afraid of leaving that money lying in the room with no security. So were carrying that bag with that cash from office to office where you were meeting people. And I do remember we were going to meet then Afghan vice president, where the security saw this stuff and everybody had a good laugh, including the vice president. So the true communist countries, of which Cuba was one, actually then came up with the idea of two currencies. China had two currencies. One was renminbi yuan, people's yuan. One was another currency for foreigners. Russians had 2 rubles. One was their own ruble, which you could use to buy anything at a normal ordinary shop, which usually had nothing. Or you had the convertible ruble. So as Indian journalists, when we traveled to Soviet Union then, we got most of our foreign exchange allocation in travelers checks that State Bank used to issue in convertible rupees. So these rupees could then be converted into rubles as if they were first converted into dollar. Similarly, many other countries, communist countries, had 2 currencies, one for local use, which bought you very little, and one for the good stuff. Second, most local employees, which was almost all the people in communist countries, only got paid in local currencies. So there was a great clamor for the convertible currency, because that convertible currency could also buy you goodies from what was called as dollar shops. So these communist countries, in the name of creating a classless society, actually created two official classes and a wonderful black market. When we were covering the breakup of the Eastern Bloc, one thing we always did quite happily and quite openly, and every journalist did that, was to, when you reach a place, you need stuff done at government offices, your credentials, anything, you first go to the hotel's dollar shop. All good hotels have dollar shops. Take your minder, your so-called guide from the government or any official, and a list of requests: buy me 2 cans of coffee, Kent cigarettes in Romania and Bucharest, Marlboro cigarettes in Russia, whiskey. Cuba also, they created a similar marvel. So Cuba had two currencies, the Cuban pesos and Cuban convertible peso. Now Cuban peso was 25 to 1 convertible peso, because convertible peso was considered the same as the dollar. This January, this was causing a lot of distortion, because tourists paid in convertible peso, and there was a great clamor for that. And also a parallel bribe and grease market also came up. Bureaucracy got corrupted, because you could buy up a lot of people with convertible currency or dollars. Dollar also became then an openly used currency in Cuba. This January 1, 2021, Miguel Diaz-Canel's government actually merged the two currencies, and they said the two currencies will be one. So now Cuba has only one currency, one peso, which is pegged at about 25 peso to the dollar. So what this did was that a lot of people who were still using the old currency like normal currency, they found that their net worth has collapsed. But at the same time, now with this currency, they can get stuff that really matters to them in their lives. So Cuba is in the middle of this complicated change, and it's in this complicated change that they have brought about this regime change also. So before I conclude, I know that many of you will find something the difference with me today. I don't wear contact lenses. You might. I know that many of you will say, where are my glasses? So my glasses are kept inside, because you know what? Because I have a negative number for a distance. If I have to read something, I read much better without my glasses. I don't use contact lenses. So because I knew today I had a lot of data that I had to read, and I have to read my handwriting, which is also a struggle. So I decided to do it without my glasses, because I read much better without my glasses.